You're listening to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast, your source of music news, stories, and 2 hour deep dive interviews with bands that have sold over 80 million albums. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Now let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are joined by a very special guest. He's achieved a level of mastery as the singer for the band 12 Stones. He's also the male vocalist on the Evanescence single Bring Me to Life, which won a Grammy, sold 10 million copies, and pushed the album to sell 17 million copies. So welcome to the podcast, Paul McCoy. Paul, how are you? And is it true that you play in a very unique sports league?
Hey, what's up? Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing wonderful. And yes, I play in a local cornhole league here in Louisiana. Got my boys in the Madisonville Baggers. You know, I got a rep right. I rep the squad here. But yeah, I love those kind of weird bar games. It's like throwing a beanbag in a hole, but it's way harder than it sounds. So
That's
yeah.
a powerful shout out to the local Louisiana team. And you're saying that this isn't just fun and games. You know, people have a couple drinks and they toss a beanbag at this wooden slanted thing with a hole in it. This gets intense. This gets competitive. This gets cutthroat.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, it's the kids. It's the kids, the young guns that come up that are just ruthless, man. I started playing this years ago on tour with some bands, and we used to play for drinks. You know, whoever would win, the band that would win, they would get all their drinks bought by the other bands. And I thought I was really good. And then I talked my fiance into starting to play with me, and she just destroyed me every single time we would play. And so then we joined a league, and she has far surpassed my skill level. But these kids, they come in. I had a kid not long ago that was playing me in a tournament, and he just destroyed me. And on the last bag he threw it. It looked right at me and walked off before the bag even landed. It went in. He basically mic dropped me and then walked off. So I gotta get my get back on him when I see him next.
That's too funny. You thought you were good, and then you realize there are levels to this game when it comes to cornhole.
Yeah, extensive levels, and I am in the bottom of that totem pole, but I'm working my way up.
It's funny that you mentioned that you play it with bands while on tour. The more I interview bands, you hear about the things that they're up to on the road. And a lot of bands, they pick up some kind of hobby or sport or something athletic to stay busy, to stay in shape, to stay out of trouble. So you hear about all these, for some reason, heavy bands where musicians are into the martial arts. So you have, Maynard from Tool, Jiu-Jitsu. You have members of Five Finger Death Punch and Seether into that stuff. Who is it? The singer from Trivium, the singer and guitarist. He's huge into that. Did you ever get into the martial arts stuff, or for you, cornhole is one of the things that kept you out of trouble?
I never got into the martial arts stuff. We did for a good while on tour. We brought out a Chuck Norris Total Gym, and so we did our little calisthenic type workouts and stuff just to try to stay in shape. A lot of people don't realize when you're out on the road touring 8, 9 months out of the year, there's really nothing but dead time most of the day. You know, if we're headlining, we might play an hour and 15 minutes. The whole rest of the day is just nothing to do. We're all bored and broke and, smelly. So we just got to find ways to keep ourselves busy. So instead of spending the whole day acting like fools, we brought some cornhole boards out. We brought the grill out. So we like to just have like a little barbecue every day when we were out on the road. So yeah.
That sounds like a pretty good way to spend the time on the road. I like to share how the guests and I know each other to show the importance of networking, of building community, fostering relationships. So in our case, a few months ago, I did an interview with Taylor Roberts, who's a member of Taproot, member of Riding with Killers, and during the interview, we talked about this song that you were a part of for Riding with Killers on the album, and I ended up sending the clip to you just so you saw, what people are saying, and then we ended up kind of in the same loop, the same bubble, the same universe online. So that's the history of how we got to where we are here today doing the interview, and I wanted to kick this interview off powerfully. So I reached out to Taylor And he sent in some kind words for you. So Taylor had a lot to say. So I think he likes you. This is what he says. I remember being a kid and getting to go to Rock and Relief at the Gulfport Event Center, seeing 12 Stones live for the first time with Atom Ship. They were absolutely electric. I remember later on meeting them at Bebop Records in Biloxi for the release of Potter's Field. Paul had his signature smile and looked so excited to be meeting everyone. I finally get to him in line and he sees I have a guitar with me to sign. He asks if I'm absolutely sure because he didn't want to ruin my Gibson. Years later, I would eventually continue to land in the same room as Paul and formed a friendship that I still cherish to this day. We finally got to write and record a song together that I'm so proud of. My journey with Paul has been nothing short of beautiful and wonderful. He's always been so kind and open about music and life in general. He lights up any room he's in, and it's impossible not to smile when you're with him. Paul, you've always been a friend and a mentor. You're one of the best people I've ever met in this business, and it's because you're you. I love you, man. Thanks for always being real. So that's from Taylor Roberts from Taproot and Writing with Killers.
Man, that's gonna make me tear up over here, man. I love him, man. He's great, and I don't know if you can see it, but I got a little Taproot drumhead up here signed before he was in the band. We did some tours with those guys. Love them to death. Taylor's just a phenomenal human being, and it's great watching him flourish. It's great watching him grow as a person, as a musician. He's got a lot going on, and he handles it with such grace and tenacity. He's a go-getter, and it's always great to see that. And I'm honored that we finally got to do a song together. I love that song. It's a cool. I was living in Nashville at the time, and he was like, "Let's do something." So he sent it over, and I got to get on there, and it's really makes me happy to be able to be a part of something with him after so many years of being buddies.
It was a lot of fun to go through the Taproot discography and the Writing with Killers discography. There's so many badass guitar riffs going through all those songs. So it was a very cool one to do. So we're going to do a full 2 hour deep dive interview. We're going to cover your entire life, career, discography. So there's a long journey we have to go through. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. Where does this love of music come from? Is there maybe an earliest musical memory that kicks in when you think back to the original love of music?
Yeah, sure. Growing up, my mom sang in church choir, and I loved watching her. She loved it, and I loved seeing her face light up when she got to get up and perform on Sundays and stuff like that. So I kind of learned from her just being around her so much. And my dad had a couple guitars when I was growing up, and he knew how to play like three songs, and I just
One of
thought it
them
was
is the Beatles, probably.
the dude was like the intro to the Top Gun theme, just the beginning part of it, and then like we called it the Bull song, but it was like dun 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 dun, dun. And we would run around the house, with the horns up, and it was like I just remember thinking he was like Steve Vai at that point. So him with playing guitar, my mom singing in the church, just kind of gave me a little taste for it, and then as I got older. I started singing just at my house, albums that I loved, artists that I loved. We had a two cassette deck karaoke machine, and I would put the cassette of what I was trying to learn in one side, and I would just record just my vocals on the other tape. And then I'd go back and listen to it and compare it to the singer that I was trying to mimic. And then I would just wear those tapes out, just trying to catch up. So I learned how to kind of mimic other artists and their melodies and stuff like that. Just slaving away in my room, just trying to wear out that karaoke machine.
And then so that's how you started singing. And then when did playing guitar come along and maybe songwriting, writing your own songs?
Sure, I got my first guitar when I was 14, I believe. My parents got me a classical acoustic guitar, and I immediately fell in love. I never took lessons. I was one of those kids that I got to learn it my way. So I literally just learned by ear. I would just, put my chin on the guitar and feel the vibrations and kind of learn like, all right, that sounds like that works together. I still don't know a lot of the chords I play to this day, and I'm, 43 years old now, and I couldn't tell you, other than the basic chords, I couldn't tell you half the stuff I'm doing, just because it feels right, and that's supposed to be the way. So I think when 14, I got that guitar, and been in love ever since. And then I think I was maybe still 14 or 15, and I wrote my first song, and it was a direct ripoff musically of another artist that I really liked, but it was my first song, and I was like, perfect. I'm so happy. And then from that, it was just all downhill or uphill, whatever, whichever is the best way.
And do you think that not learning the technical stuff of the guitar, that maybe that helped you to be unique as a singer and as a guitarist and as a songwriter, because maybe you're not following the conventional rules, maybe you're thinking outside of the box?
Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it. In like, it's hard to teach feel. That's what I say to people. Like, I know a lot of super talented, shreddy guitar players, but they're so good. A lot of times, it's almost robotic in a sense, versus someone that like a more blues style player that just kind of sits back on the beat and kind of plays. So when I write a song, I like to let the music dictate where the melody and the lyrics go and the content. You can write something that's super emotional sounding and then have a subject matter that matches it. And then that to me is what makes the song develop itself, where it's kind of like I could go in there and write all these technical chords that I know by the book go together perfectly, but if it doesn't have a feel that evokes some sort of emotion from me, then it seems a little bit forced. So I like the organic approach as far as learning to play instruments and writing.
And when you first started singing and when you first started playing guitar, who were the musicians that you kind of idolized, that you looked up to and thought, man, if I dedicate myself to this craft, that's the pinnacle of what is possible?
Well, if this is a judgment-free zone, I grew up my
We're in
first.
the trust tree. You
We're in the
could
trust
say
tree.
anything.
Are we not in the trust tree? No, that's great. When I grew up, the early years, I grew up in a small town in Mississippi, and there were no rock stations. There were none of that. And my dad always said, "Son, there's two types of music: country and western." So my early singing, it came from my mom in church, and also some of the old country greats like Garth Brooks, Clint Black, some of that era of country music. Uh, and then I moved to Louisiana and met a couple friends that were deep into the grunge scene. And someone gave me the Silverchair Frog Stomp album. And I remember listening to it front to back, just wore it out. And then I realized that we were the same age. And I'm like,
They were like 13 when that came out, eh?
yeah. And I was sitting in Spanish class, like, why am I sitting in class right now? And these kids that are my age are taking over the world, writing phenomenal music. And that was, I think, the pivotal moment for me where I decided, man, I want to do that. I want to do that. Like, yeah, school's great and all, but I would love to make music for a living. And I had zero abilities at that time, but man, I'm a pit bull when I'm determined. It's hard to get me off of something if it's with what my mind is set on.
Silverchair, that album Frog Stomp, that was in my top 5 albums of all time for years, until I discovered other music. But that album is so solid. And then when you find out that they're 13, 14 years old, it just blows your mind. I did an interview with David Bottrell, who's massive producer, did Tool, Anima, and Lateralis, and Stained, and everybody. And he did some later Silverchair albums. And I asked him, there's a few musicians like Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails that you see that guy and you're like, man, this is just genius. It's like genius personified. Everything he does, musically, writing, visually, just a genius. And I said, Daniel Johns, a singer from Silverchair, to me feels like that kind of guy, like just this mad scientist when it comes to music.
Yeah,
And and he was saying, yeah, man, like the musical ideas that guy has, going from the grunge, and then later on it's like orchestral. It's more, like it has, the later stuff had more of like a Smashing Pumpkins, melancholy and the infinite sadness, with like string arrangements and all this stuff.
yeah, it's phenomenal where he came from a 14-year-old angsty kid from Australia to albums like Diorama that have just full on orchestrated setups, but he conducted all of that. He wrote all those parts, and another thing I always loved is that he doesn't do the auto tune. He doesn't. What you hear is what he did, and it's just he's a perfectionist in that sense, almost to a fault. And I've read some biographies on him from the viewpoint of other members of the band and stuff, and he said his perfectionism was almost to a fault, where he was like, "We have to do it. It's got to be right." And that's a lot of pressure to put on a three-piece band full of kids, to then grow up not settling, not being like, this is good enough. Good enough was not. It had to be great, and that's something I always respected about his drive to always try to better and be better with each attempt to release something.
So the other two members, maybe a year or two ago, released either a book or a documentary. Do you think that's what you checked out, or?
Yeah, I'm halfway through that book right now.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay, cool. Um, as a kid, before figuring out that being a musician is what you want to do with your life, was there anything else that you wanted to be when you grew up as a kid?
Yeah, I was going to be a professional soccer player. Honestly, I spent most of my childhood on a soccer field. Uh, a weird thing about me, kind of, is that I'm right-handed, but I'm left-footed. So uh, I don't know how that happened in my life, but I throw right-handed, but I kick left-footed. So in soccer, I was always back in those days. I had a phenomenal metabolism, and I was super fast. I think I ran a 4.5 40, and I was left-footed. So for soccer, it worked out great. I always got to play left half, left wing, and I didn't have to turn my body back in to cross the ball with my dominant foot. So I got offers to go play all over the place. Played for a traveling team, and that's what I was convinced I was going to do. Me and a couple of my friends were just lived on it. If I wasn't forced into school, I was on a field. I had a ball at my feet, or I was on a basketball court. I was doing something, athletic at all times when I was younger. So yeah, I thought I was gonna go out there and change the world as a soccer player. So I'm happy that things turned out the way they did.
At what age did the soccer dream turn into the music dream?
It was high school. I was still playing through high school. So we got our record deal when I was 19. I probably stopped playing soccer and started kind of leaning more towards music about 17. So I was still well into my high school career before I decided to maybe pivot and see what I could do musically.
And if you and I were friends at 16, so you're still in high school, and you invited me over to listen to music, what albums do you think you would be playing? So you mentioned Silverchair. I don't know if that's when you were six. That was before you were 16, but at 16, what do you think you were playing?
Pantera, Deftones. Uh, I think I had Adrenaline album pretty constant.
You're already into the heavy stuff at
Yeah, I
16.
loved it, man. It just made me like it made me want to move, and that's the thing is like I just love something that makes me feel some kind of way. Like listen to any guitar part that Dimebag ever played, man, it makes me want to do the vulgar display of power of the punch. And it was like, let's go. I remember being in my buddy Art in his bedroom playing along to Dime on the broom handle, just he's got a broom and I got a broom and we're just in there playing guitar and yeah, so I got into the heavier stuff pretty soon after moving to Louisiana, thanks to my buddy Art. He had quite the quite the musical collection and turned me on to a lot of stuff that now I hold in very high regard musically.
I have a series on the podcast where I invite guests back for a series called My Five Favorite Albums. So we dive into their favorite albums of all time. And I had a guest that had the Pantera album, Vulgar Display of Power. So I just, I'm sinking my teeth into it. I'm reading up on the history and everything about it. And man, that album is so badass. I was way late to the party. That was like a little bit before my time. So I love that album, and then I go and there's like the holy trinity of the three albums they did in a row that were insane. And then I was able to catch them. I went to the Metallica the 2 night event, and one night was Pantera, so it was kind of cool. I got into my Pantera mode, like 20 years later than it was supposed to be.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm being from New Orleans, this is where Phil lives. So we got Down, his other band. We got Crowbar, all these good southern swampy sludge metal bands that I just love. So I got to meet Phil a few times. He actually came in the studio. He was friends with Dave Fortman, who did a lot of production for us, and I was singing a song on our second record, and at the very end, there's a long, like 15-second scream that I hold out. So I had my headphones on, I had my eyes closed, and I was just screaming. And when I opened my eyes, I looked into the control room and there was Phil just standing there like, and I was like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, you know. And then he just hit the talk back. He was like, "That was metal. Hail Satan." And he left. And I was like, Phil just said my scream was metal, and that's all it took for me. I know he will never remember that, but it was a massive point in my life to where I was just like my idol of just heavy music just leaned in and said my scream was metal, and that's all it took for me. I was hooked at that point. So yeah, I appreciate that very much.
And of all the people that could give you approval for a scream, he's like the one guy you would want to get that approval from.
Without question. I mean, especially at that time in my life, I think this was 2003, maybe. So I was just all in on Pantera, and I mean, I still am 100%. But it was just one of those moments, like you just look up and like, what are you? How? When did you get here? You know, it's one of those like I was still in there working, so it wasn't like I could step out and go hang out and pick his brain, but just to see somebody that I admired throw a little bit of a compliment was just it was life changing for me at that moment.
We have a lot of young musicians that watch these interviews. For any of those young musicians that are considering singing for the heavier genres and are interested in learning how to maybe scream, do you have any tips that might help them?
For me, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know I could scream until we were at practice one time and we were joking around, just kind of warming up, doing some covers. And we did a cover of a cover. We did the Limp Bizkit version of Faith. And so whenever Fred goes in there, gotta have faith. I was I was just messing around and I just went for it. And everyone and I looked at me and were like, whoa, dude. I'm like, okay, I don't know what just happened. So for me, I know a lot of artists that do like the inward screaming or they're like kind of like I call it fake screaming where they're like raw, you know. But for me, it's from the soul. I mean, it comes I dig in from my toes up and it is a legit scream. I remember one of the times working with a very, very well-known producer and I said, all right, this part of the song, I want to do a scream track. And he didn't realize that I really scream that, you know. Uh, so he came in there, he's like, what's going on? I'm like, oh, I'm doing a scream track. He's like, not like that. What was that? Yeah, so he's used to working with other artists that don't do the full guttural scream.
You probably topped out all the levels, like you distorted the mic and all those things.
I did without a doubt. They were not ready for they had my mic set way too hot for me to do a full send on it. And like this is my little home studio. I don't have it soundproof very well. So my neighbors whenever I'm working on a feature right now for another artist and it's got some screams in it. So while I'm rehearsing and trying to come up with my parts, it might be 10:30 at night and I'm just in here screaming. I know the neighbors are probably on the fence about calling the cops. Luckily they know me and what I do, so they probably settle back down, but I'm sure I've got woken up some neighborhood dogs quite a few times.
And that Limp Bizkit cover of Faith. You also have another opportunity to scream in there later in the song where there's the build, the get the fuck up, that part. So
Yeah.
you went for it there as well, I'm thinking.
Yes, indeed, and I was still young and in shape, so I'm sure I was jumping off of something while we did it, just to pay honor to the biscuit.
I saw them last summer in Toronto, which was pretty cool. They're what's the word? It's not a reunion, but it's like they've kind of peaked again where they're insanely popular and selling out arenas, and the new album is critics always hated them despite them selling 40 million albums, and suddenly the new stuff is getting more acclaim, and it's like, wait, critics are coming around, they're playing arenas, and Metallica, just this tour's been going on for like 3 years, and Metallica just announced the next leg of dates, and they have Limp Bizkit opening for them at the Toronto show.
I think that's a fantastic ad. That they're one of the best shows I ever saw. I forget the tour that I saw them on, but they had a big like robot on stage, like a transformer, and the drummer was in one forearm of the robot, the DJ was in the other, and then the chest opened up, and the rest of the guys came out. They had a flamethrower that came off the thing's shoulder. It was unbelievable, and I just remember being like, That is what production can do for a show. They were already stellar in their like energy that they brought, but you add a solid production like that, you can't be beat. And you're saying about how, they were always critically hated on. That's what I always say about like Nickelback. Like everybody hates on Nickelback except for the 40,000 people a night they're playing in front of in these arenas, except for the, you know, $300,000 a night they're selling in t-shirts and $40,000 they're shooting in pyro. Everybody wants to talk and dog on Nickelback, but we all know that Leader of Men. We all know you're singing along, so don't play. You got to give those dudes the credit they deserve.
What's funny is, it was always Nickelback and Creed that would get bagged on the most because they were the two most popular, the two most radio friendly. And they've been bagged on for so long that it's come around where now they're cool again. Like people now admit, like, you know what, I've actually liked them this whole time. And there's like a resurgence where people admit. And Nickelback said they wouldn't still be big now if it wasn't for all the haters, because since social media, Nickelback always has these haters that make these viral videos, and they said without the viral videos, they wouldn't still be relevant now.
Yeah, and the thing is, they have a great attitude, a great approach to it. That they understand what's happening. They understand that there's so many haters out. There's a lot of keyboard warriors out there. There's a lot of people that act big and bad in their mom's basement and talking some noise. But at the end of the day, man, that check is still getting cashed. So I have nothing but respect for those guys. We did a lot of tours with it was the Three Doors Nickelback tour, and they kind of co-headlined. They were great. They put on a killer show every night. One of the biggest tours we ever did was we were on tour with Creed in their prime during like the Weathered tour and a few others. And everybody talks like they weren't there. But I saw the full arenas months and months and months on end. I saw the line around the stadium every single night. So, all these people can pretend like they weren't there, but I know somewhere in your closet you've got a Creed shirt hanging up in there, and you just waited till now till it's cool to come back out and pretend like you don't know all the words.
Yeah, they have at least one of the first three Creed albums in their discography. And man, Weathered was like the peak of Creed. So for you to be on that tour is insane.
Yes, indeed. It was an eye-opening experience for sure. That was one of the first tours we did. So we went from playing in front of like 20 people in a tiny little club where we were basically elbow to elbow on stage to now we're in an arena and I've got to like yell across the stage to the guitar players and stuff to be like, all right, we're doing this one next. Skip that song, do this, calling audibles. So yeah, it was a learning experience. We kind of got thrown into the fire, and I couldn't have asked for a better opportunity. Bands like them and Seven Dust that really helped us work on our craft.
You said that you guys got signed when you were young, you were maybe 19. What are some of the jobs you had up until 19 and music took off? People like to the fans love when, these rock stars come on and you find out that they had regular crappy jobs like the rest of us. Can you remember any of those jobs? Were there any memorable ones?
Yeah, I've done everything. When I was younger, I worked in a grocery store stocking shelves. I worked at a Christmas tree farm selling Christmas trees to overprivileged people.
A
And
very seasonal job.
yeah, and then I've done it all. And even recently, up until we just kind of did this comeback, I've grew up working in kitchens. So whenever we weren't on tour, I started it as a dishwasher when I was very young, old enough to have a worker's permit, but barely, And then I worked my way up to bussing tables. I waited tables for a little while, and then I just fell in love with cooking. So even as recent as last year, I was a kitchen manager. So I love the intensity of being on a kitchen with a bunch of crazy individuals and putting out food. So yeah, I've done a little bit of everything. I got no shame in my game. You got to do what you got to do to keep the lights on.
In the last couple years, I read the Anthony Bourdain book, Kitchen Confidential, like his debut book that made him a star. And man, that book really shows you the culture of working in a restaurant, and it really opens your eyes to, how intense it is, the camaraderie and the relationships that you build, and also the bad side of it that people might not be aware of. So it's pretty intense.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, I always said after doing so much work in restaurants, I always said, after you graduate high school or even when you're in high school, I think it should be mandatory for people to have to work in the service industry in some capacity for 2 years. I think it's humbling to be waiting on someone that, is looking down their nose at you and tells you you can't do anything right and they don't tip you and then like you're waiting on them hand and foot and man, I think as human beings, it's necessary in some degree to have that humbling experience and kind of remind us that like, hey, we're all human, and you're not better than me, I'm not better than you. We all have to learn to exist together, and the camaraderie in the back of the house in the kitchen is just it's next level. Some of my closest friends still to this day are people that came up on a kitchen with me where we were ready to throw knives at the end of the night, but then, you buy him a beer and you hug it out, and then the next day you come in and we do it all over again. So yeah, I think it should be mandatory that people should have to work in a restaurant or any service industry job for a little while to kind of get a little of that humble pie and also that team building. You have to learn you're only as good as your weakest link. So you got some guy struggling one night, he's just hungover or not feeling it or just in his feelings or something. The rest of us have to kind of gather around him and let him have his moment, but we're gonna have to pick him up and keep the party moving.
So let's dive into 12 Stones. How did you meet the other members, and where did the idea of actually starting a band together come from?
Sure, yeah. There's a local music store here in Mandeville, Louisiana that our original drummer Pat Quave, he worked there, and Eric Weaver, lead guitar, he worked there as well. It was right near my house, so I used to go there as a broke kid and just play on all the instruments I could not afford.
Hmm.
I would always just mess around with some of my guitar ideas while I was in there, and it wasn't a super busy music store all the time, so Eric and Pat would come over and be like, "Oh, what is that you're messing with?" I'm like, "I don't know. It's just a cool little idea." And then Eric would get a guitar and sit next to me and kind of add into it. And then Pat would jump up on one of the drum sets that was set up. And we just organically, we weren't friends before. None of us knew each other. I mean, Pat and Eric worked together, but that was the extent of any of our relationships. And so I would just come in a couple times a week, and then it turned into like, see you tomorrow. And it was like, all right, cool. And then one day, this kid comes in and he's like, "Do y'all sell bass strings?" And we're like, "Oh, a bass player. You play bass. Cool, man. Come check it out." And that was Kevin Darr, our original bass player. So that was the foundation. The four of us just in this music store, just kind of uh, we got to the point where we were allowed to stay after hours after the business closed, and that kind of turned into our like little rehearsals. And then we did that honestly for 6 to 8 months. We just did no shows. We just went in there and just played music together and kind of started writing songs, and then like let's be serious and try to develop some stuff. And there were some local bands that were always playing shows. One was called Ground Fault, and they reached out to Pat, our drummer, and allowed us to come open up one of the local shows. So we knew we had to have a band name at that point. And none of us really thought we were going to be in a band. We just were like, this is something, it's a nice hobby. It's enjoyable to go, hang out with these guys I didn't really know and make music together. So then once that happened, we knew we had to have a band name, and we're like, all right, maybe we should, give this a little consideration and take it a little more seriously.
And what do you remember the other names that you were considering before 12 Stones?
I've honestly tried to block them out of my memory.
They were
They're
that bad?
really bad ones because the way we picked 12 Stones, to be 100% honest, and I've told this story before, but we knew we had to have a name for the flyer for these shows coming up. So everybody in the band wrote down a handful of ideas that they thought would be cool that weren't already used. And man, they were all really, really bad. So we put them all in a hat and we stirred the hat up and we picked one out, and it was 12 Stones. And we were like, that's the least bad one. Like to me, anyway, I was like, awesome. All right, that's fine. We can call it whatever you want. I mean, we're only going to play a couple of local shows, and then that's going to be it. And then here we are 25 years later talking about this.
And did you figure out which of the members put 12 Stones in there?
I don't remember, honestly. There was we had some like temporary members at the time that were playing with us. And one of the guys was very religious, so I feel like it was probably him. His name was Larry.
Is there a religious reference to 12 stones in the Bible or something? Or
Old Testament of the Bible. It has to do with the 12 tribes of Israel. As the sea was parted, there was 12 stones placed at the head of the camp to remind them of what they had seen that day.
Hmm.
I only found that out well after we were called 12 Stones. So that didn't help our "we're not a Christian band" uh, speech, but it is what it is. Like I said, we didn't plan on doing more than a handful of shows just for fun. And now here we are, almost like 25 years later.
Yeah. So the band formed in 2000, so about 25 years. Does it feel like 25 years?
No, it doesn't. Time flies. They always say time flies when you're having fun or whatever. But for me, it was like it was just a blur of just happiness and excitement. And these last few years have felt much longer than the first few years because we've been dormant and we've been, living adult lives and having to work jobs and provide for our families and do things like that. But the first few years, man, it's a blur. It was just so much fun, so much energy, so many great memories. And from all the back in my drinking days, I still get flashbacks of like, oh, that's right, we did that. I can't believe oh, that's true. We did that. We did that tour. We did that show, so it's still cool for me to go back and have these memories pop up.
And I read that within like 15 months, you guys got signed to a major label deal. I mean, bands go 3 years, 5 years, 10 years before getting any kind of a deal, and a major label deal is what people are looking for. Is it true that it was just 15 months?
Yeah, we did 12 shows as a band before we got our record deal. And I'll be 1000% honest with everybody. We were lucky, 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 lucky. We were in the right place at the right time. We had the right people pay attention to us when they probably shouldn't have. We took our demo that we recorded, and there's a radio station in Biloxi, Mississippi called WCPR, and they were doing a competition. You submit your demo, and if you get chosen, you get to open the homegrown stage for the big festival they do every year. So we drove out there late one night and knocked on the door, and we're like, "Hey, we want to give you our demo." And the DJ that was on the air at that time, his name was Puddin, and he was clearly,
Solid name.
yeah, yeah. He's honestly he's great. He's still doing his thing, but he was bored and let us in the studio and did a fake, not fake, but he interviewed us. He let us in the studio and was like, we were all kids, I was 19 years old. So he's like, come on in, we'll do an interview with you guys. And then in between the commercial breaks, he played the song in the studio and he listened to it. And he's like, I don't know how to say this, but I actually really like this. And I'm like, well, you did. You just said it. You're like, you don't have to make it weird, but so he liked it and he sent it to the station director and said, hey, would it be okay if I played this band's song on the radio tonight? And that guy ended up being Kenny Vest, who became our manager and for a
Wow.
long time. And uh, Kenny put us on the right path. And he always had because he ran the radio station. He always had record label workers reaching out to him saying, "Hey, what do we got to do to get you to play this on your station?" So he just started sending stuff back up the pipeline. He's like, "Well, all right, well, check this out. I got this new band I'm managing. Take a listen, put it in the right hands." And so we ended up, because of Kenny's relationships that he built, we ended up showcasing for 7 different record labels. About a year after we started the band, if you would, and we did 12 shows, uh, all local, nothing out of our immediate area. And then we were on in LA making our debut record, and then we were on tour with Creed. So we were like, what are we doing
He
here?
kind of fast tracked the
Yeah,
journey.
in a freakish way. And like I said, it's all luck and right place, right time. There was no secret recipe for us other than we just showed up when we were supposed to show up, and the universe helped us out, and all the things fell into place, and we were very, very fortunate to even get the opportunity to showcase, but to let alone be signed by Wind Up.
So Wind Up at the time, I remember it was one of my favorite labels back then with the music I was listening to. Wind Up was like one of the most successful labels in the world. They had Creed, they had Evanescence, they had Seether, they had Finger 11. They were just crushing it. So they were one of the seven labels that were interested. And then how did you decide to choose them?
Well, some of the labels weren't as interested in us as we were in them, but the reality of the situation is there's a wonderful woman named Diana Meltzer. She was the owner of Wind Up Records. Her and her late husband, Alan Meltzer, uh, owned the label. And she heard our song, The Way I Feel, and then she heard Broken. And she said, "We are signing them. I'm not asking you, I'm telling you." So even other people at Wind Up weren't as thrilled with us as she was. But she said, absolutely, without question, we're taking this band on. And she treated us like human beings, not like cattle on the auction block, you know. A lot of these guys, you know, for people that don't know, when you do a showcase for a record label, you go to a room. It's not like they come and check you out at a live show where there's a crowd. We went into a soundproof room. We set up on this tiny little stage, and like six guys come in for each label, and they stand there and they're like, it's basically like, impress me.
Just no energy coming back your way.
Right. And so like it's hard to like, let me see your hands and like getting everybody pumped up when it's some guys over there that like they have a lunch meeting in 30 minutes. So you gotta win them over right now. And with Diana, she came in and it was just like, this is what's happening. This is our band. And you know, people listen to her because the first band she ever signed as an A&R person or a label owner was a little band called Creed. So if your first pick, you know, in the draft is Creed, people are going to listen to you. So she's got the golden ears still to this day. Love her to death. She's just a phenomenal human being that doesn't have the ability to lie. She's everything is on her sleeve. Her emotions are there, and she's just like a second mom to me. Even these, you know, all these years later, she still comments on all our Facebook posts and still reaches out and texts and calls and all that stuff. She just, without her, we would not be sitting here having this conversation for sure.
So you mentioned that she heard two songs. She heard Broken and The Way I Feel, which ended up being two of the three singles from your debut major label album. Does that mean you had those two songs on the demo?
Yeah, those were our two of our.
That's cool.
Yep, and we had a 5 song demo. Those were two of the five. So
That's pretty solid.
yeah.
That's so cool. Um, I was going to share a story. I I went to an event and there was someone from a record label in Canada who had signed for the rights to the first Creed album to be the distributor in Canada. And they were an unknown band at that time. And there was like a bidding war in Canada. And he ended up paying whatever upfront, say $100,000 just to get the rights. Like, you know, you could lose that money. And he justified, like, hey, it seems like this is the next big band. To just break even on $100,000, you don't have to sell that many records in Canada. I don't know, 10,000 records. And he believed it could be more successful. So he paid what every other label thought he was way overpaying, say $100,000 just to get the rights. And then the album went, I don't know, 4 times platinum in Canada, sold, say, 400,000 copies, which generates, I don't know, 4 million plus. So he looked like a genius. But I remember him describing kind of this bidding war for this unknown Creed band in Canada. So he made the right decision there.
Absolutely. And I know, you know, being Canadian, one of the main reasons I even wanted to entertain Wind Up Records was Finger 11. Man, that Tip record is hands down one of my favorite records to this day. Their energy live, all of that. We were even going to go back and pay homage. Before they were Finger 11, they were called Rainbow Butt Monkeys. And we were going to do one of their songs called Circles. And I loved Finger 11 so much, still do. But I was like, man, we're going to be on Finger 11's label. It was like, yeah, Creed's cool, whatever. And then, you know, they had Seether and Breaking Point and a lot of these bands that were doing really well. But I was like, man, then we got to go in the studio for our fourth record in Wind Up's studio in Times Square. And at the same time we were there, Finger 11 was there. It was after they had worked on Paralyzer. So I was just like, my guys, you know, I was just in awe. And they're just such great dudes. So it's good to see them doing their thing.
So I did my homework and I have some kind words sent in from Rich Bedeau, former Finger Eleven drummer. So he played on four of their most iconic albums, including the album with Paralyzer. He was also one of the founding members of Saint Asonia, the supergroup with members of 3 Days Grace, Staind, Seether. And he played drums for Daughtry for some shows, some massive festival shows. So Rich sent in the following words. He said, I've known Paul for quite a few years now. We were both in the studio together in New York recording our records. So we spent lots of time in the lounge chatting about music and life. We were also label mates on Wind Up Records. Paul is a force of nature as a singer and a frontman. He's a hell of a human being as well. I can't wait to hear what's next in his journey. And God bless you, brother. Never stop doing what you do. So that's from Rich Bedeau, Finger 11.
That's fantastic, man. He's a great guy, and I know he's been on a sober journey, and I've been on mine. So it's great to kind of see him, and it's been cool to go back and forth and check in on each other, just through social media at random times, and he's just phenomenal. I love the guys like Rich with their playing style with the big animated, just you can't help
A
but
showman up there.
just have to look at him. And most drummers are like, I'm in the back, I play the pocket, I keep the beat. But then you got guys like Rich that just come out and you're just like, you're drawn to it. You have to see that energy and that dedication to his craft. And it doesn't matter what band he was playing for, he just brings it every time. He hits hard as could be. And I got nothing but love and respect for that man for sure.
It's the car crash where once you see it, you can't look away. You're just drawn to him at the back.
Yes, indeed. That's the best way to put it. There's guys like Morgan Rose and
So that's Seven Dust, Morgan
yeah,
Rose.
yeah, Morgan from Seven Dust, and then
John Wysocki from Staind was like that as well.
yeah, yeah, him, and then Shannon Larkin from Godsmack. Before
Oh, nice.
met him when he was in Amen and a few other bands, but yeah, he has that real like cryptic like stick tricks. There's always something happening,
Yeah.
but he's just in the pocket at all times. So yeah, Rich is one of those guys that I loved watching him play drums.
And what's cool is Sully Erna was a drummer before being their singer, I believe. When you see them live, they'll bring out two drum kits and they have like not a drum off, but they'll both play together on a few songs. So it's cool to have two cool drummers in one band like that.
Yeah, exactly. There's a handful of bands that had that kind of similar thing. I think Johnny from Nothing More played drums before he moved to singer.
Yeah.
I think Brad from Three Doors Down also might have played drums on the debut album, if I'm not mistaken. But there's a handful of those guys that it's kind of funny to me. I always feel like singers wanted to be drum. I always wanted to be a drummer, but I don't have the this thing going on. I can't multitask my limbs. So
I just did a podcast episode on Aerosmith, the story behind their band name. And Steven Tyler, it was the reverse. I didn't know this, but I guess Steven Tyler was the drummer in a band, and him and another band both played on the same bill. And they realized that, man, if we just form one super group together, we would be awesome. And so he suggested that, but he said, I want to go from drums. We'll take the drummer from the other band, but I want to be the lead singer. So I didn't know this, but Steven Tyler was the drummer in his band before Aerosmith.
yeah, I didn't know that either. That's cool to learn those kind of things. I like those kind of hidden facts.
So let's talk about the debut major label album. So self-titled 12 Stones in 2002. So three singles. We mentioned Broken and The Way I Feel. There was also Crash. What thoughts, memories, emotions come back to you now when you think back to that debut album that really kicked off the journey you've been on in the last 23 years?
The fact that we didn't know anything about anything. We were young and hungry and happy to be there, but I remember having no idea what we were doing when we went to the studio. We got our record deal. We all got this is back when record deals still did this, but we got sizable record advances. So we each got a stack of cash as kids. We all went and bought cars and we drove from Louisiana to LA. And we lived next door to Nick Cannon in this apartment that the label put us in. And we would go to the studio, and I remember being in the studio as this 19-year-old country kid. And I just remember, like, from videos I'd seen of people in the studio, the hands on the headphones, like the We Are the World moment, where everybody's. So I remember tracking some of the songs, and my dad showed up and had the on the shoulder video camera. And watched some of this footage a few years ago, and I'm like eyes closed, holding my headphones. I'm like, that's not a requirement to sing in the studio. But I just remember just not knowing what we were doing and just being like getting the feedback and having the production actually like learning how production works, having somebody that's not in the band stand there and go, that's a cool idea, but let's try this, or let's try this, or what if you sang it like this? And I was like, there's levels to this, and we had no clue what we were doing. Like I said, we went from playing in front of a handful of friends and family here around town to now I'm in the studio with Jay Baumgartner in Los Angeles. No adults to keep me on track, and I'm just out here with too much money and not enough sense.
And Dave Fortman also produced that. There was two producers on it.
Jay Baumgartner was the producer, and Dave Fortman was our co-producer because he did our original demo,
Mm.
and we loved working with him. He was really good at knowing how to work with me, and like if I was given a bad take, he would say the computer was glitching or something. He would never make me feel like I wasn't doing my job, and I knew that, but it still made it easier on me to go like, all right, well, just let me know when you get that computer fixed. And he was just giving me a chance to regroup, reset, and have another strong take after that. So yeah, he came out with us to co-produce that record, and then he went on to solo produce the second record and the Picture Perfect album as well.
So, for our listeners that might not be familiar with Dave Fortman and Jay Baumgartner, Dave Fortman worked with Godsmack, Mudvayne, Slipknot, Simple Plan, Evanescence, to name a few. And Jay worked with Seether, Bush, Seven Dust, Papa Roach, 3 Days Grace, POD, Newfound Glory, and Alien Ant Farm. So, these are two heavy hitters. So, it's amazing on your debut album. That's who you're working with, and you're learning from in the studio as a green young musician.
Yeah, it was pretty insane to just because there was a couple times while we were there recording that they had like a Halloween party. So like all these other band guys that had worked in that studio showed up for this Halloween party. We're in there trying to like work on bridges and ideas, and I come out and it's the Papa Roach guys and some of the Ant Farm guys, and this is like all these. And again, I'm a bigger fan of music than I am a musician. So I still believe that to this day. Like I'm still a fanboy when it comes to a lot of these other bands, that we've been fortunate enough to call peers and we've done festivals and tours with. I still freak out when I'm like, oh, what? All right, cool. Well, yeah, we're doing this show. So to come out of the recording booth and see Jacoby and all these guys that were just, at their prime, yeah, it was a really cool thing to be like, feel like you've made it. And then we had Josh Freese play drums on that record, and he's just a machine. He's a maniac. And it was just like watching these legendary musicians help us. It was mind blowing.
Did Josh play drums for the entire album or just a few songs?
The whole record, and he did it in 2 days.
It's easy breezy for him.
Yeah, it was nothing. And the thing is, and I've seen interviews with him since then, but he said he's played on so many albums that he doesn't even remember playing on those albums until he hears a certain fill. He's like, well, that's definitely me. Because, obviously the drums are what's recorded first in most situations. So once we go back and add all the bells and whistles to it, the drums are just kind of part of it. But I have video of him. He would we would play the track, he would listen to it and play along with it and like make his mental notes. And then he'd be like, all right, I'm ready. And then it was a one take, and he's like, you're good, I'm good, next song. And he was so effortless with it that I remember him doing, we called it the running man, where he was hitting the hi-hats, alternating with each hand during a tracking, like not just like a test run, but while he's recording, he's doing this and like looking around and just he showed up in like a Subaru station wagon wearing a sleeveless Argyle sweater and pink socks. I'm like, this is the guy from the Vandals, man. In the perfect circle, It's like this guy is an absolute legend, and now he's with Foo Fighters, and he's just an unbelievable talent, and we're beyond honored that he was able to play on that first record for us.
You must have been happy to see the announcement of him being selected as the drummer for the Foo Fighters.
Very much so. I think he's just a super talent. I think he's one of those elite guys that for the bands that can afford him and can attain his services, man, there's not many people I would say that are better. And I know he just did a podcast interview maybe a year ago, and I saw and another producer I'd done some writing with, a guy named Rick Beato, and they mentioned us in that interview, and I'm like, I'm like, oh, that's cool, man. We got they showed a little album cover in the corner. He's like, and he was saying the same thing. He's like, I've worked on so many albums, and Rick was like, yeah, you did the 12 Stones record, and Josh was like, 12 Stones, that's another one, yeah. And so I was like, we did it, we made it, you know.
That's so cool because Rick Beato is amazing. He's, for what I do, he's kind of the pinnacle of mastery. He's a guy that he doesn't just interview. It's like he's a successful producer with Shinedown albums and all that. He's a musician, and he gets all the best guests, and he's just so relaxed and happy to be doing the interview that you're happy to be there. It's like you feel like you as a listener have the same vibe as him. Who it's like he can't believe he's talking to David Gilmour from Pink Floyd. So yeah, Rick Beato's a legend, and someone that I look up to as someone that has a podcast.
Absolutely. And if you've seen any of the video of like his ear training method and stuff with the young kid that was always on the piano, he could play like a multi-chord on the piano, and the kid can name every sub chord within that chord. And it's just like it's just some mind-blowing stuff. And I remember going and working with some songs. We didn't end up using the songs at the time, but my time that I spent with Rick, I went to his home studio. I helped him lay the wood flooring in his studio because I had a buddy that had done. So I was down there. We were tongue and groove on the flooring down in his studio, and
Is
he's
that
just,
where he does the interviews in his podcast? That's his studio, or
I believe so. If he's still at the place that he was, this was, man, this was
it's been a hot minute.
yeah, this was like 20 years ago. So if he's moved on, but he had a awesome little spot, not little, it was a nice spot out outskirts of Atlanta. And yeah, I just remember going there, and he was still building out the studio at the bottom, didn't have the floors in it or anything yet. So very honored to have been able to work with him and to see him and Josh, talking about us in the interview. I was like, man, that's cool. It's a full circle moment.
I saw the Foo Fighters back in 2000, so a long, long time ago. But then I just saw them recently with that tour with Josh Freese. So it was, man, it's so intense that live show now. Dave Grohl is. It's funny. He's mostly screaming now. It's like he's so into it that he doesn't really sing very much. It's kind of just belting everything out as a scream. So it's definitely different than the show where he's mostly just singing in 2000.
Yeah, for sure. It's cool to see like, still putting out that energy.
I wanted so we're gonna dive into Bring Me to Life for a little bit, but I wanted to share kind of the holy trinity of what helped me become a 12 Stones fan. So they say a lot of times with marketing, you need to get an impression 3 times before you act on something. So you see an ad for something, but you don't buy it yet. Then you see a billboard somewhere, and then a friend says, "Hey, have you heard this new album or read this new book?" So it takes 3 impressions to really stick. And in the case of 12 Stones, so the 3 impressions were I first got the Scorpion King soundtrack. So this was 2002, and it was on the strength of the Godsmack single "I Stand Alone." So I bought that album. That was a gold selling album in the US, 500,000 copies sold. That was huge. And then down at I believe track 10 or track 12, there's the song "My Life" from 12 Stone. So that was my introduction to the band. Oh, that's a cool song. And then your debut album comes out and Broken is there as a single. And I go, oh, that's that band again from the soundtrack. And then the final thing was you're the voice on the Evanescence single "Bring Me to Life." And those 3 things, I'm like, okay, like there's something going on with this band. And I went out and bought the debut album and listened to it for years. So it took those 3 points to for it to stick for me to become a paying customer for 12 Stones. I wonder if you've heard that before for ways that maybe people became a fan of the band.
Yeah, I mean, not as specific, but yeah, I mean, I think doing the Evanescence song was a huge door opener for not only 12 Stones, but for myself personally. We nobody knew what that song was going to do, or that band for that matter. I mean, we were label mates. So for me to be able to do that, I was super excited to be a part of that, and then it just exploded. So it was a weird like. I won't say bittersweet, but it was like I had put so much of my personal investments in time and energy into 12 Stones and our music and our live show and all these things. And then I go and do a song for another, a feature for another band. And then I get to just watch that just skyrocket to the moon. And it just goes to show you, it's like, you never know what's going to pop and what's not. And so I was very fortunate to be able to do that song with them and have it open so many doors for us moving forward.
This episode has been brought to you by the Women in the Music Industry podcast. It's hosted by music producer Rob Wells, who has worked with global superstars like Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, and Selena Gomez. Through his 1 hour interviews, he shines a spotlight on the remarkable women who are breaking barriers and making their mark in the music industry. Some of his notable guests include Morgan Lander of the multi-million selling metal band Kitty, and Pam Shane, who co-wrote Genie in a Bottle for Christina Aguilera. If you're a fan of the Joel Martin Mastery podcast, you'll love the Women in the Music Industry podcast, which is available on all platforms. So I want to share with our listeners just how incredible the success was, like the metrics on that song. So if anyone listening now missed the intro, Paul is the male, the wake me up, the male. You probably cringe hearing someone else try to do that, but it's the male wake me up vocal on the Evanescence hit "Bring Me to Life." So that's Paul, and so the song "Bring Me to Life" charted in the top 10 in over 20 countries. It went to number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song itself sold over 10 million copies worldwide. It pushed Evanescence to, international stardom. It won a Grammy and was nominated for a second Grammy. That debut album from Evanescence went on to sell over 17 million copies, which makes it not only it's one of the best-selling debut albums of all time for sure, and also one of the best-selling albums period of all time. The song on Spotify and the video on YouTube combined have over 3 billion, not million, billion plays. Uh, Almost no human being will ever experience that level of success. Can you share what your life was like at the peak of that song?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I put so much of my life force into 12 Stones that all of that got just overlooked, and I was now the wake me up guy. You know what I mean? I'm like, I need to be on a coffee commercial or something at this point. I need to get
Yeah,
into
yeah, there should be some Folgers or Starbucks sponsorships here.
do that. I need to still get that happening. Somebody the other day told me I think it was my guitar player John. He was talking to me. He was like, "Man, you still need to like start your own coffee company, and wake me up coffee." I'm like, "Man, I should ride that wave for sure." But no, it was phenomenal. It opened so many doors. Like I said, I won a Grammy because of that song. I got to attend the Grammys. I got to perform live on the Jay Leno show. Just a lot of things that we weren't going to do as 12 Stones, not because we didn't want to, but just the opportunities weren't presenting themselves the same way. And for that song to not only be on their debut album, but that was their first single. It's the first song that anyone ever heard from Evanescence. Ended up being a life changer for all of us. I think from the year 2000 to 2010, it was like the third or something highest selling record of that decade, and it was behind like the Beatles' #1 album and Michael Jackson's greatest hits and like stuff that is just like a no-brainer to be at the top of those sales charts. But yeah, it was just mind-blowing to watch that star on its ascension.
I remember back in 2003, even then, I would be checking the Billboard charts every week, and the top 5 albums on the Billboard 200 every week for like a year. It was Evanescence, Fallen. It was Eminem, I believe the Eminem show, 2002-ish, and 50 Cent, Get Rich or Die Trying. Those 3 albums were in the top 5. Like they never left. And I was like, man, there's no room for anyone else up here.
Yeah, it's pretty wild just to think, like even today, people, if I'm meeting somebody and they'll be like, "Oh, you're in a band," and I'll say, "Yeah, I'm in a band called 12 Stones. We've been around a long time," and they're like, "Haven't heard of that." And I'm like, I sang the male vocal on "Bring Me to Life," and they're like, "What? You're And it's like still to this day, you get that reaction from just a song that it's undeniable, and it kind of starts to fall into the category of like the Nickelbacks and the Creeds, where it's like, oh, the Evanescence, and it's like, man, they're still killing it. Like you can't say anything. They got a legendary lineup in that band. Amy's a powerhouse vocally, uh, with her stage presence and just as a human being, she does a lot of great stuff. So again, I'm honored and privileged to have been able to be a part of that. And the way it happened was crazy, but it ended up working out pretty well. So
Yeah, Evanescence just played the arena down the street from me in Ottawa. So, 22,000 people, and it's 22 years later. And we're going to talk about 12 Stones is on the lineup of two of the greatest festival lineups I've ever seen in my life. And I believe Evanescence is one of the headliners there. I could be wrong, but you guys are back on the same bill as well.
same bill, same day. So
Oh, that's so cool. Well,
I,
we'll talk about that in a second. So it won the Grammy Award for Best Hard Rock Performance, also nominated for Best Rock Song. What did it mean to you to even just to get the nomination that it's the highest level of acclaim a musician can get, that your country is acknowledging your hard work and your talent. So the nomination and then the win, what did that mean to you?
I meant the world to me. I mean, I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to respond to it. Like I was fortunate enough to not only win or nominate and then win, but I got to attend the Grammys and I got to go and walk the red carpet. Nobody knew who we were. No, I mean they knew Evanescence, but
Did
I was
you wear a nice suit?
oh I wore a nice shirt and I wore a big blown glass medallion. It was like a hippie gangster chain. You know what I mean? It had like the hemp rope necklace and then it's just
Represent.
galaxy bead. Just we're just trying to stick out and be weird and look different. But I rode there with Dave Fortman and Ben Moody, and Ben dressed up like he was in ZZ Top. He had a big fake beard on, walked with a cane, had all this crazy jewelry on. And I just remember people were like, "Who are you guys?" It was like we did not coordinate our outfits no at once. So
So Ben Moody was the guitarist and songwriter in Evanescence, and I remember being shocked. It's like as soon as Evanescence blew up, he left the band. Um, do you have any idea what that was? Like, hey, maybe once there was success, he could go do something more specific to what his goals were.
I believe there was some personal stuff going on between the members. I don't know enough to have a
Hmm.
say, and I also respect their right
Yeah,
to speak on that on themselves. I do believe there's some internal stuff going on, but I think the decision for him worked out. He ended up going on to write
a
songs.
huge songwriter.
Yeah, Kelly Clarkson and Avril Lavigne and just some massive people that. So he's done well for himself, and I don't think it hurt him to step away and find himself. You know what I'm saying? Like Evanescence has always been, will always be, in my opinion, the Amy Lee project. She is such a powerhouse, such a force to be reckoned with that I feel like someone like Ben Moody, who is also fairly alpha and fairly dominant in like his ability to connect with people, it was great to see him step out of a shadow that he didn't necessarily want or need to be in, but that's a big shadow that she cast on the music world, especially when they were blowing up. So for him to be able to gather himself, step aside, and just continue his ascension, it was a cool thing to watch, and I think it turned out pretty well for him.
And it shows how talented he is to go from writing Evanescence style music to writing for Avril Lavigne and Kelly Clarkson. Like, regardless of genre, the guy can write a hit song.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned there's a cool story in how you ended up on the song. So you are label mates, 12 Stones and Evanescence. So I'm like, okay, there's the wind up connection. And then I realized that your producer also produced Fallen, I believe. So there's another connection. So what's the actual story of how you end up there?
Well, hindsight makes it a lot easier for me to put it all together. But at the time, we had our first album out, and we were in the process of writing the second album. And we happened to be up in New York at the Wind Up offices. We were having a meeting about, upcoming songs, what we were doing. And Evanescence had been signed, but they hadn't worked on any music necessarily at this point. And at the time, the president of the label, we were in his office, and he was like, guys need to hear this band Evanescence we signed, and this is going to be their first single." And they were talking about because this is 2002, I believe, and they were talking about all the big rap rock guys that were there at the time. You know, we got Mike Shinoda, you got Jacoby, I believe Josie was mentioned from Saliva. Some of these guys that,
Limp Bizkit.
right, those are the guys that were doing their thing at the time. And they showed us a demo version of Bring Me to Life, and it had whatever local producer they were using kind of did a mock up of the part that ended up that I did. And the label was talking about all these guys they wanted to reach out to do this song. And I jokingly was like, well, man, if you can't find anybody famous to do it, I'll do it. You know, just kind of taking a jab at myself and trying to be funny. And they're like, oh, okay, you know, we'll keep that in mind. I'm like, yeah, yeah, your people are called my people. Sure, sure. And then a few weeks later, we were back home and we were loading up our bus to head to Texas to go on tour with Seven Dust. And I got a phone call from my manager and he said, don't get on the bus. I'm like, what? He's like, I just got a call from the label and they want you to do the Evanescence song. I'm like, really? Okay, yeah. He's like, so they got you a flight. You got to go to the airport right now. Go to the airport. You're flying to LA. You're going to track the song tonight. And then tomorrow we'll fly you to Texas to meet up with the guys to get back to the tour. So I went straight to the airport. I listened to the song the entire flight to LA and just muscle memory, just had to make sure I had my parts ready to go. I got to the studio at like 11 p.m. I'd worked with Dave already previously, so I saw him and the comfortability set in. Uh, the band was there, said hello to them, went into the studio. I think I tracked for about an hour and a half. I went back to the hotel, slept for 2 hours, caught a red eye back to Texas, and and that was kind of the history of the creation of the song. And then I think it was only maybe a month or so later that they called me and said, "All right, you got to go shoot the music video." We shot it in Romania, and then they said, "Also, you got to be ready. You're going to go out back out to LA, and you're going to perform on the Access Hollywood show, and also Jay Leno." And I'm like, "Wait, what happened?" Like,
Come
I,
again?
I stopped at Romania, and then you said Jay Leno, like we're going to be on the Jay Leno show, and he's like, "Oh yeah." So, like I said, I had already had some level of success with 12 Stones, but nothing like this. Nothing like jet setting all over the world, you know, for music videos and live performances and stuff. So it was definitely a whirlwind, it wasn't until years later, honestly, that I found out that there was any kind of disagreement between the band and label about this part. I was just the young, dumb redneck kid that was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." Okay. I didn't realize that there was a little bit of hostile energy between the label who was telling them, "You got to have this part in the song. It's what's popular right now. We think it's gotta make the song more currently relevant." And Amy sticking to her artistic integrity, which I fully support. And I feel like ignorance is bliss for me in that moment, because had I known that she didn't like this part of the song or didn't feel that it was what she wanted to represent the band, I would have never done it. I would have been like, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, definitely. I'm not. It's your stuff. It's
Stick with
your
the artist. Yeah.
yeah. Like I'm gonna, I got your back 100%." But it wasn't until well after the fact that I found out that there was all this issue, and then the internet being what it is, all the fans kind of turned on me, like I forced my way into their artistic and their it just kind of stepped all over it, and it turned into like this, women can't do anything in the music industry without a male. And I'm like, whoa, like no, no, no. I I thought I was invited, I didn't know that the label invited me, and that it was not necessarily what the band wanted, because we didn't know each other. We were just label mates and stuff. And so I felt horrible for years after that. And I got a lot of hate for a long time. And I'm like, for a while there, it made me cringe when I heard the song, and it couldn't go anywhere without hearing it. You'd be in the bank and I'm just hearing myself, standing in Blockbuster Video or something. And you're just like, oh man, here it is again. But as the years have gone on, I've spent a lot of time, and I've talked to Amy, and we've talked about the reality of the situation. She never knew that I was getting the level of like pushback as I was. And she was like, "Man, I didn't realize that this is what how this was affecting you personally." I was like, dude, I love the fact that we did this song together, and I'm honored still to this day. Every time I hear it, I light up a little bit. But there was a long period of time there, not long after the song was released, where I was like, every time it gets brought up, I get made to be like a villain, and it wasn't the band's doing. It was a lot of the fans were like, she's an angel, and how dare you go in there and like interfere with her artistic integrity. I'm like, I didn't want to. I didn't even write this part. Like, I just performed it. I showed up. I sang what I was instructed to sing, and that was the end of it for me. And it took a long time for me to be able to vocalize that without just kind of shutting down. But um, yeah, we've grown a lot. I've grown a lot, and our relationship is great now these days. I reached out to her last week and just let her know about the scheduling for this festival coming up, and I was like, I just want you to know we're both going to be there on Sunday. And she said, I like where your head's at. So yeah, yeah, we're all in a good place now. So
And it looking back now, even though maybe Amy Lee, it wasn't her first choice to do that, but looking back with the insane success of that single that propelled a 40 million selling career for Evanescence, you have to say, I think maybe the label knew what they were doing, despite it going against the artistic integrity of the artist.
it's a rare moment that I say a label made a good decision. I
Yeah.
mean, but I, it may be a little biased on my part, but I do feel that that part is a huge thing. I know for a long time they didn't perform my part live in their set, but what was cool to me was the crowd filled in. I got to go perform with them years and years ago at a festival in Florida. I was living there at the time, and they came through and I talked to her and I got to go up on stage, but she had me wait until like the second half of the song to come out. And man, that first chorus came in and it was 20,000 people, wake me up. And I was like over on the side, like, yeah, cool, man. Like it just, it's peanut butter and jelly at this point for me. It's perfect for me. What we did is what we were supposed to do. And it worked out to the benefit of everybody involved, whether it was agreed upon or a planned thing. I think we're all better off now because that happened.
So on the band on 12 Stone social media, there's a video of you getting up and performing the song with Evanescence. That's about 5 years ago. Is that the show you're talking about?
No, that video was filmed in New Orleans. My daughter actually filmed that for me. I took her with me and we played at the Sanger Theater. Well, Evanescence did. And that was a few years after the Florida Festival, but it was the same thing because we had never performed the song. We didn't really do much. We did some touring for like 2 weeks together, but I didn't really do the song much. They had their guitar player, John LeCompte, at the time. He was doing my part live. And then, so when they came through New Orleans, I realized we had never done the song together where I'm from. So I didn't really even tell anybody. I told my now fiance, she was with me. I brought my daughter, and then same thing. I kind of came out halfway through, and being that it was a hometown and where 12 Stones is from, you could just hear the crowd, just the wall of sound that hit when I came running out, and it's man, it's such a high, such an adrenaline rush to have that where you're just like, wow, man, and they're really here for it. So.
So we have a fan question sent in from Sonia Martel. Her question is, 12 Stones wrote the song Let Go exclusively for the Daredevil soundtrack in 2003. What was the process for this? Did you pick a song you had already written, or did you get to watch an early screening of the movie and use that as inspiration?
That was a song we had already written. If I remember correctly, it might have been one of the songs on the demo. Um, yeah, so that we were fortunate enough for a lot of the soundtracks and stuff. The label connections helped make that happen. There are certain songs that we tried to write specifically for certain things. Like on the debut album, we have a song called "Back Up." It was written initially to be the theme song for The Rock. for his wrestling walkout theme. We took his current theme at the time and modified it, the chords, and then we just wrote a whole new song around it. So there are songs that we do try to target right, but most of the stuff is just songs that we write that gets placed in certain spots.
So in 2004, you guys released Potter's Field. This is your second major label album, two singles, Far Away and Photograph. So the album debuted in the top 30 on the Billboard 200, debuted at number two on Billboard's top Christian albums. What was it like seeing your album that high up on the legit charts that everything is weighed against?
Yeah, it is awesome. I love that. It's like it gives it a little sense of not entitlement, but a sense of just like importance in it to a degree. There's so many other bands that are out there, and we're like friendly competitive. If that makes any sense. Like when we take the stage live, I want to make whoever else is playing that show, I want to make them work. I want to make them like come out and earn it, because I promise you, I'm going to go out there and leave every bit of my energy out there. And it's the same when we're releasing singles. We want to be competitive. We want our songs to be well received. I think any artist would be lying if they said otherwise. But so yeah, when we released those songs for Potter's Field, it was ironic to me because we had Far Away was our first single and Photograph was our second single. And that
Nickelback?
Nickelback
Yeah.
had Photograph as their first single and Far Away as their second single at the same exact cycle time. And I was like, look, I know I don't pick very original song titles. I'm very simplistic when it comes to that. One word is usually best for me. Uh, but man, I was like, oh man, of course it's Nickelback, like the biggest band at the time. And then we're like, well, we also have a song called Photograph, So it's like,
Yeah. If you have time for two songs called Photograph.
yeah, yeah, back to back, we'll play it. So
That's funny. And were you feeling pressure to follow up the success with Bring Me to Life, or were you excited to ride that momentum with this second album?
the second album is still my favorite album. So my fear is that what I see in a lot of other bands, especially at that time, was, and it was all put into perspective. I forget who told me, but it was like, you have your whole life to write your first record. And then depending on the success of that first record, you might have 6 months to try to follow it up. So we set what I considered to be our bar. We set our benchmark with the self-titled record. And then we were on all these tours, big arena tours. We didn't have time to really get together and write. So when we did get in, we bought this big warehouse out here in Covington in the middle of nowhere. And we rented that and we would go in there 12 hours a day and just work on our craft. And I'm so proud of the music we came up with for the second record. I think that's where we really found our sound. It's where we really hit our stride. Because for the first record, I feel like the label liked the songs and we did a decent job. I would totally re-record it differently now in hindsight because we didn't know anything at that time. So for the second record, we had a little bit of experience recording. We had a little bit experience with the live aspect, and we knew that we wanted to be able to basically take whatever we recorded and replicate it live. We didn't want to have any extra stuff that wasn't like what you hear on the album is what you're going to see when you go to a 12 Stone show. And we were able to capture that energy with Dave Fortman and put it to a recording. So for me personally, that's my favorite of the discography.
So listening through the entire 12 Stones discography, I thought that Potter's Field was a big step up in quality from the debut album. That sonically, it was a step up. That the songwriting, the songs, the recording, the performances, it felt like a more mature album. I guess you would agree with that as well, then.
Yeah, without a doubt. I feel like again, that's kind of where we found our stride. That was the first album that Aaron, our drummer, played on. He did some backing vocals for me. So that was the true 12 Stones. That was the original lineup that developed the sound. It was me, Eric, Kevin, Aaron, and we just went in there and did the things that we love to do and kind of made some magic with it. So.
In 2007, you guys released your third album, Anthem for the Underdog, four singles, Lie to Me, Anthem for the Underdog, Adrenaline, and Broken Road. The first two singles charted in the top 30 on Billboard's mainstream rock charts. What was it like to get that kind of support from radio when it's hard to get on radio?
It's so hard to get on radio. And like I always tell people like, you got a record deal, you got signed. I'm like, that's like so and to put it into perspective, getting a record deal at that time was like being able to purchase a lottery ticket. It didn't mean you had a winning lottery ticket. It just means you were in the drawing. So to be on a label, to have a label backing, you still not only had to compete with your label mates for radio time and play, but also all of rock music, all rock bands from all the different labels. So, and a lot of people don't know this, but modern radio stations have a limit on how many current songs they can put in their rotation. They have to have a lot of stuff for like the legacy bands, the ones that are always going to be on rock radio. So while we might be going out with a new single, we have record label representatives that go to each of their stations in their market and say, "Hey, these are the bands that I have from Wind Up that are coming out with a new single. How much can you get them in there? Where can you squeeze them in?" And unfortunately for us, we were always releasing singles at the same time bands like Seether were. So if the label's like, or the radio station says, we can put five current radio singles in rotation. It's not just five from Wind Up, it's five new. So we come out with a song we're proud of, and now we're competing with bands that have a bigger following than us, a bigger footprint in the industry. So we were always kind of like in the shadows. We're like, hey, we still have music over here. We're looking over the fence. But unfortunately for us, every time we would go to release a song, so would Seether or so would someone else. So like we were kind of like fighting an uphill battle constantly just to be put in rotation. And being put in rotation means they might play it at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. And they're like, well, we didn't really get a reaction from it. It's like, right, right. We get that because you didn't put it, it's not like you put it at the morning show or you didn't put it at drive time. You put it in the overnight up and coming section where people were like, you know,
It's
maybe
hard to get a reaction when people are semi comatose when they hear the song.
right. So, it was unfortunate that we had to struggle with radio. So getting in the top of any chart, getting on the charts at all for us was a huge accomplishment where we just felt like, all right, cool. Well, we're finding our way and we're figuring it out. And, we've always been on the big arena tours. We've always been the first or second band on the bill. We became notorious for like being the guys that kicked the show off. And that put a little chip on our shoulder to where we're like, okay, we're gonna play Topeka, Kansas at 5:15 p.m. on a Wednesday night. I promise you, whoever's in that room, I'm stealing your attention. I'm gonna make you remember that we were here. And then when Seven Dust comes on, you're gonna forget about us because they're just legendary at their craft. But by the time the night's over, you're gonna be like, man, I saw 12 Stones. And I still see people commenting all the time. They're like, I saw you open up for this band and you blew them off the stage. And it's like those are the kind of accolades that motivate me to keep going. And when I see strong frontmen and performers, it drives me. It makes me like, okay, cool. I see what you're doing. Let's do this. Let's go. And it's that friendly competition that comes back, and I think it makes the entire show better for people that work together that way.
So the song "Lie to Me" from that album, that's one of my favorite 12 Stone songs. It has great harmonies. Has hearing and singing harmonies come easy to you from the start, or when you were younger, did you have to really work on it to hear the harmonies and to be able to sing them against the main vocal?
I still struggle with that. Every producer that I've worked with, my brain is wired to hear the melody. If I create a melody, that's where my mind goes. So there's times where I've been in the studio working with producers like Skid Mills, and he's phenomenal at recognizing the harmonies. Him and Justin co-produced that Anthem for the Underdog record, and they're both very talented guys, and they know the different levels of harmonies and stuff. And Skid will be like, "All right, here's the harmony," and he'll sing it to me, and I'm like, "Okay, I hear it, I got it." And then the song starts, and my brain goes, nope, it's the main line. So that's still to this day one of my things that I struggle with in studio time, where I'm like, I can hear it. If I was just singing that with no music behind it, I can mimic you all day long, no problem. But the second the song starts, my brain's like, well, this is what you wrote, so this is what you're supposed to be doing, and it takes a little while to get it warmed up, but we usually knock it out.
In 2010, you guys released an EP called The Only Easy Day Was Yesterday. Is it true that the album title, that's in reference to a Navy SEALs saying
Yeah.
or quote?
Yes, we were fortunate enough. We got to go hang out with some Navy SEALs in Coronado, and we met a couple of individuals that were highly ranked, and just what an eye-opening experience that was. We got to go travel all around the base and learn about how their training is. They actually let us take one of their boats. They make their trainees. They carry this boat overhead, and it's like one of those inflatable rafts. And they have to take it overhead, go out into the surf, put the boat in, and they have to paddle it out past the waves, turn around, and come back. And they said that most of the people, because obviously they wear them out pretty good before they get in the boat. But when they get in the boat, they usually flip it over. And then a bunch of, fat, drunken, tattooed idiots like us got in there and we didn't flip our boat. And so when we came back in, the instructors were like, oh, they thought Hell Week was bad before. Wait till we tell them you guys didn't flip your boat. The next time I see any of these guys flip a boat, it's going to be misery. And we're like, oh, man. So, yeah, we learned a lot from that experience and just what these amazing humans are able to do and what they do and what they sacrifice, not only their family lives, but their personal health and mindset has got to be just next level to do those type of things. So we were given a book by one of the guys we met, an awesome guy named John, very, very well-known Navy SEAL, and he gave us a book, and the title of the book was "The Only Easy Day Was Yesterday," and he signed it in the cover. So we were like, "Well, that's it. That's the next thing." So the song "We Are One" from that record, it ended up being used for the WWE for a group called the Nexus, but we wrote it about the military, about the Navy SEALs. So it's like, we walk alone in the unknown. We live to change the face of history. That's all about, the military and what they do, what they sacrifice, so that we don't have to worry about those kind of things.
So that single "We Are One," you mentioned it got picked up by WWE. It got picked up everywhere. I mean, it was used at a basketball tournament, the Washington Capitals, the Philadelphia Flyers, a darts player, Paul Nicholson. Why do you think the sporting world latched on to that song?
I have no idea. I truly don't. I like the song. It's not one of my favorite ones we've ever done, but it's one of the most popular songs we have. If we go to Spotify, I think it's in like the top three or five.
I think it's number two. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like up there, and it's humbling and mind blowing. But I'm not really sure why so many people picked it up. I think it's got that four on the floor kick drum, boom, boom, boom. So it's kind of more of like a chant kind of thing going on. And "We Are One" it's talking about coming together and supporting each other. So I feel like maybe that has something to do with it, the lyrical content and the easy singability. It's easy to remember because very few lyrics. And it's like "We Are One" a whole bunch of times. So I think it's sing along and a lot of people enjoy it.
Yeah, I think it has like 38 million spins just on Spotify. So some pretty crazy. That's like the entire population of Canada. The song was produced by David Bendith, who's one of the massive rock producers. He's done Papa Roach and Breaking Benjamin and Paramore. So I reached out to one David Bendith, and he said, "Paul was a pleasure to work with. We had a great time, and the single we recorded was very strong." So that's David Bendith, short and sweet, baby.
Very, very cool. He's the one that I scared, I think, when I did the screams for that song that we did. I went in there and yeah, it was a wild one. I hit the scream track that I had on a song called "Disappear," and he was like, "What was that?" So I think Ben does a little bit more from Breaking Benjamin. I think he does a little bit more of the throaty, like breathy style screams. So when I said I'm going to do a scream track, I think that's what he envisioned. So they had their mic presets not set for me to just scream from the pits of hell.
Yeah, the depths of Hades. You're bringing the guttural vibes. So The next two albums, so Beneath the Scars in 2012 and Picture Perfect in 2017, neither of those albums are on Spotify to listen to. Is that a record label um, kind of a what's not a clash, but is that an issue with record labels? That seems to be why anytime I can't find an album, they're like, yeah, it's on a different record label. We can't seem to get it up there.
So both of those albums are independently on two different record labels. The Beneath the Scars album was on EMG, Executive Music Group. They no longer exist. And then the Picture Perfect record was on Cleopatra Records. I wasn't aware that Picture Perfect wasn't available. I hear people all the time tell me that Beneath the Scars is not available. So I reached out, and it turns out that the distributor for that album, the digital distributor, had it removed. I've yet to find out why or how to get it unremoved, but I'm like, now I don't have a manager. We're independent. I don't have a label. I do it all myself. And I'm a singer, so I have less of the business acumen that I need to even to get someone to answer an email or a phone call. It's like I just need to know what I need to do to get this stuff back because people all the time are like, "Hey, Beneath the Scars isn't on Spotify anymore," and I'm like, "What?" So then I start. It turns out it's a distributor. I've reached out. I've not heard back, but again, I don't have the pull that I need, I guess, to have those conversations.
What's funny is Beneath the Scars, the instrumental version of the album is on Spotify. So if you're a singer and you want to karaoke the whole album, it's there, but not the version with the vocals. But what album is on there is the newer EP. So Smoke and Mirrors Volume 1 in 2020, five-song EP. There's one single, Sever. Man, this came out in the middle of the pandemic. Like the pandemic to me was about March 2020. This comes out, I think, near the end, maybe November 2020. What were the challenges of writing, recording, and releasing music during this crazy pandemic?
Oh man, it was so stir crazy. I think that's what motivated me to start writing. I have a good buddy of mine here in Louisiana named Chad Mosby, and he's just a phenomenal songwriter. And him and I have he was in other bands when we were coming up, and we kind of like just missed each other in the touring side of things. But great dude, and him and I were always talking. And he had some like musical ideas that he was working on and sent them over, and I was like, man, I like this, I like that, so we just kind of were killing time, killing our boredom. And I lived in Nashville at the time, and so while I was up there, him and I had the idea. I'm like, man, we got enough cool ideas, and I had some old material from years previous that I wanted to revisit. And then with that, with the combination of the songs that Chad and I had kind of worked on, being in Nashville, I was right up the road from Skid Mills, who did the Beneath the Scars record. He did the Anthem for the Underdog record with Justin. Uh, and so I reached out to Skid and was like, "Hey, man, like, what do I got to do to get back in the room with you?" And we showed him the songs we've been working on. He was all about it, and so I just went over there during the pandemic, and I was still working at a restaurant at the time. So I would go to work, and on my days off, I'd go to the studio and make this record with Skid. And having Chad be involved was a really cool thing. It's kind of, tying in some of the hometown.
It must have felt cathartic to release an album, something positive during such uncertain, chaotic times.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of always been our thing. Is we always try to have something to say, something of value. We've been fortunate enough to be given a platform, so we always want to say something positive. I'm in life not the most positive human being, so this is a nice way for me to kind of remind myself to think a little bit more positive and to be a better human being every day. So the pandemic, is just crippling to most people in the world in a lot of ways, and it was just everyone felt defeated and kind of downtrodden. So in typical 12 Sons fashion, I try to turn a negative into a positive and remind people that, hey man, but my dad always said every day above ground's a good day. So I try to put those vibes out back into the universe and in hopes that it hits somebody's ears and helps them reclaim their life and really be reminded how important it is to take every second and live it to the fullest.
So last year, you guys released a badass cover of Kiss from a Rose. How did you guys choose that song specifically? Because it's definitely a shift in genre from the original song.
Oh, for sure. So that was recorded years and years ago. We recorded that somewhere around the same time as we did the anthem for the Underdog record, but we just never released it for whatever. We wanted to put it on some records, and the record labels we were on at the time weren't interested in it, and we were like, whatever. So we kind of leaked it on YouTube, and somebody made like a Marvel superhero version with the song in the background, but we never pushed it. We never got any traction. So last year, a buddy of mine named Nick came up, and Justin Reimer was like, "Hey man, why don't we release Kiss from a Rose? We never did anything. What if we did like an actual release for it?" And I was like, "Okay." So we had it remixed, we had it remastered, and I put it out myself with the backing of my buddy Nick and obviously Justin Reimer. So it was just kind of a cool thing. But we picked the song because we were trying to do a cover around that time. There was a band called Kay's Choice, and they had a song called Not an Addict. And I love that song. And we did a cover of that. And then we were looking at other ideas of songs to cover, one of which was almost done was Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper. But we realized that so many bands had already done that. So we were like, what's one that nobody's covering? And I forget who it was in the band, but somebody said, what if we did Kiss from a Rose by Seal? And I laughed. I was like, I can't sing that. That's crazy, man. We're not, the song from Batman. You kidding me? And I was like, then we got in there and we did a little rocked up version of it. And I started singing it and I was like, whoa, all right. It's not as bad as I thought, man. And then it ended up taking on its own little life there. And it's still to this day one of my favorite drum fills that Aaron never played on the drums. It was just in that song and the little breakdown. It's like a little gallop roll thing he does. But man, I'll shut everybody up in the room if that part comes on. I'm like, listen to this drum part that Aaron played. So yeah, it was one of those where we just wanted to pick something unique that hadn't been covered by 100 people already.
As soon as you said that, it was recorded over a decade ago, I was thinking, man, it sounds so current. Like it's such a great quality recording. And then as soon as you said it was remixed and remastered, I was like, yeah, like it sounds super fresh, like it was recorded today.
Yeah, Justin remixed it, and Brad Blackwood, I believe, is the one that remastered it for us. We did add some additional guitars to kind of modernize the sound a little bit and make it a little more current. But yeah, we took that. It sounded big back then, and now to be able to go back and have these awesome, talented guys help us remix and remaster it, it just set it apart on a whole new level for us.
So with Smoke and Mirrors coming out in 2020, with the renewed interest in the band, with the upcoming festivals, the shows you guys are playing, is there any new music in the works? I know it's top secret, but on behalf of the 12 Stone fans, I have to ask, even if I can't get anything.
Yeah, I'm always writing. So that's the one thing about me is that I've always got like my phone is my voice memos is just full of ideas after ideas. And I intentionally named the last EP Smoke and Mirrors Volume 1 so that I would have to follow it up. I've kind of pigeonholed myself there so that there would have to be a Volume 2 or else I just look dumb for having. I would just call it Smoke and Mirrors. I wouldn't have to call it. So I intentionally set myself up for that one with the volume one. So yes, we are going to put some new music out. We've got an updated lineup within the band currently, and we are hard at rehearsals 3 days a week right now. We're getting ready for our first show back in 6 years or so is this Friday coming up. So we're hard at work on that. And in the meantime, John, my guitar player, and I are doing acoustic tours. So between the acoustic set is 90 minutes, the live full band live show is 90 minutes. And then in rehearsals, we're writing and submitting ideas back and forth. So there will be some new music coming, hopefully this year. That is my goal. And being fully independent with no label, no manager, no nothing, it's all on us. So as soon as we can possibly get something that we're proud of and ready to put out, there will be new music for sure.
So should we assume it'll probably be a 5-song EP to match Volume 1?
I'd like to go full length again. I think the 5 song thing was just because of the pandemic, and I'm never been a person that wants to just put filler out there. And I was in Nashville kind of by myself, so I didn't have the band to bounce ideas off of. So I didn't want to overdo it without the rest of the guys and do it the right way. Now that I'm back in Louisiana. Now that we have the guys here that we can get in a room and organically create these songs, then I think I think we'll I would ideally like to have a full length follow up.
So you guys are on the bill for some of the most incredible festival lineups I've ever seen. So you have Louder Than Life in September, you have Aftershock in October, then you also have the Northwoods Rock Rally in August. Can you share with our listeners some of the bands that are listed on these festival lineups? It's actually shocking. Like I cannot believe there's that many incredible household name bands on one festival.
Yeah, I mean, Slayer, Acid Bath, Bring Me the Horizon, Spirit Box, Sleep Token, Evanescence, man, so many. I can't even keep the stage we're playing on Sunday is literally every band we've ever toured with. It's like us, Hinder, Crossfade, Flyleaf is on that show, Rev Theory, like all these bands that like that's my time frame. That's where we come from. You know,
That's
we're
like a
on.
family reunion for you guys.
Yeah, and then they got a whole bunch of like crazy heavy, super heavy, which I love, but it's kind of funny to me. I'm a troll hunter online. You know what I mean? I got nothing but time on my hands these days, so I like to go and read the message boards. I like to go read the forums and see what people are saying about the festival. And people are like, "Man, 12 Stones is not very heavy," and I'm like, "Yeah, not in comparison to Slayer for sure, but if you've ever been to a 12 Stones show." I think you might have a different opinion of our albums are different from our live show for sure, in the sense that I scream a lot more live and our energy level is through the roof live, which is hard to capture that in a studio environment. So yes, I know we're not nearly the heaviest band on the bill, not even close, but I promise you we're going to leave it all out there on that stage, and I'm hoping that we got some new fans and friends after we play.
So this is going to be totally random, but uh, when when I scheduled you to do the interview, so I'm looking at your name, Paul McCoy, and McCoy makes me think of the real McCoy. So I was like, okay, I want to see what's the history behind that saying, the real McCoy. So you m might already know this, but uh, back in 1844, there was an Elijah McCoy that was born. He lived 1844 to 1929. So he's a Canadian American engineer and inventor. So he created an innovative lubrication system for steam engines. And because his invention was of superior quality, buyers would specifically ask for the real McCoy to ensure they weren't getting an inferior imitation. And then since then, people just associate the real McCoy with anything of next level quality. So I thought that's cool. You can tell people you're the real McCoy, and that's the history behind it.
That's actually really good. I didn't know that until I read your notes earlier. I was like, wow, that's an interesting tidbit. So yeah, I did not know that. It's a cool fact.
So random, so random. So as we wrap up, we're almost at the 2 hour mark here. I wanted to ask a few questions that are kind of like a retrospective with the career. So this is hypothetical, but let's say in the distant future, 100 years from now, most of today's music has disappeared. However, there's one 12 Stone song that has been able to uh, stand the test of time. Somehow in 100 years, they can still play music, and there's just one 12 Stone song that people still play. What song would you choose that you best think represents the band? Doesn't have to be the biggest hit, it can be for whatever reason you want. One song is in a time capsule and sticks around in 100 years.
I had two that immediately popped in my head, but I'm gonna go with the one I like doing live more, Far Away. I think that to me is like it captures the energy that we bring to the stage live. The other one I was gonna say was Anthem for the Underdog because that song kind of wrote itself. That was a 5 minute. I had the guitar part, and the song kind of just I showed the guys, they started playing it. I wrote the song in 5 minutes, and it became the title track. But Far Away, I would say, is the one that I would put out there just kind of show that was on the second record that I love, and it just kind of shows who we were at that time and what I believe our sound is based off of.
So you've already had a lengthy career in the music industry. How do you keep this fun after 25 plus years?
I'm a fan first, and so this is a beyond an honor and a privilege to get to do things like this and having conversations with you and to go and play festivals like we're going to play Louder Than Life and Aftershock and all these things. I get to go watch all these other bands. I think we probably play for like 30 minutes tops, and it's a 4 day festival. I'm going all 4 days. I'm going as a fan, and people are like, "Are you going to do meet and greets?" I'm like, "I'll be in the pit with you. You'll see me."
I'll be the guy throwing bows in the
Yeah,
pit.
that's it, man. Picking up chains. I'm ready to
Yeah.
go. So, yeah, I'm a fan first, and I try not to take for granted any of the opportunities that are given to not only myself but the rest of the band. And it's just an honor to be even still talked about in any capacity, but let alone to be added to some big lineups. And we have some big headlining shows coming up too, and we're playing some of our favorite venues. So, pushing 25 years in this band, I can just say first and foremost, I'm lucky and I'm happy to even have a platform still to have a voice. And I'm as surprised as most when we get offers like this to go play these festivals. I'm like, really? All right, cool. Yeah. I would play in the parking lot on a Wednesday if you want me to, as long as I can go and hang out and watch everything. And with so many years in our career, we got a lot of friends out there in other bands. So it's going to be really great to go catch up and see so many great friends after all these years.
With a 30-minute set, that's about 6 songs. That's going to be all killer, no filler. So you're going to go right for the jugular, I think.
Yeah, our headlining show that's coming up, we're our first 4 songs, there's no break. It's back to back to back to back, and it's all punch you in the mouth stuff. So we're gonna add a couple more to that lineup for the festivals. And man, if I don't pass out from going hard, then I gotta apologize now. But I promise you, I'm gonna leave that stage. Maybe on a stretcher. I don't know, but I'm giving it everything I got, and the rest of these guys are on board. They know the plan, they know the drill. This is our job, so we're gonna wake some people up pretty hard on Sunday, and hopefully gain some new friends.
When you first started the band in 2000, could you have ever imagined the level of success that you would have achieved over the 25 years between the albums and singles and Grammys and all that stuff?
Not even close. I mean, again, we only picked our band name because we needed it for a flyer for the local show that we were opening. So I never saw this being anything more than a hobby at the time when we started. So if you would have told me in 2000 that you and I would be having this conversation in an interview 25 years later, I would have probably just hung up the phone or been like, "This is a prank caller. Get out of here."
When you look back on your life and career, what are you most proud of and what are you most grateful for?
I'm grateful that I have a career. I'm grateful that our music has been so well received throughout these 2 decades of doing this. I'm proud that we always tried to be a band of guys with integrity. We always wanted to take care of those that took care of us. We tried not to be a nuisance. I mean, it's impossible to go and not have certain bands that you don't necessarily fully click with, but we never wanted to be the band that people were like, "Oh, they're on this bill" or whatever. Like we always wanted to be like, "Oh man, 12 Stones is on this show. All right, cool." We wanted to be the band's band, and I think that's something we did fairly well at over the years and made a lot of friends. Far more friends than enemies. I wouldn't say I could even name that many people that there's any odds with. So I'm proud of us for being true to ourselves and putting our music out there and being well received, but also making friends along the way. And again, being a fan first, it's like I get to go to catering and there's Jerry Cantrell, in catering, and I'm just like, uh, I had mashed potatoes too. You know what I mean? So you're like,
Mr. Jerry.
yeah, excuse me, Mr. Jerry. But yeah, it's just cool to be able to kind of get to go to these festivals as a peer, and do those kind of things. So I'm very, very fortunate, very blessed to uh, be sitting here having this conversation with you.
Well, thank you. That's awesome. And if you could sit down next to your 10-year-old self and you could whisper words of advice, so you're taking everything you've learned since 10 years old, all the lessons and mentorship and highs and lows and goals achieved and the pitfalls that you take everything and you whisper words of advice into cute little Paul's ear to help guide him through this human experience. What do you tell him?
Save your money and don't touch the bottle. That's my main two. Stay away from the booze and save your money for a rainy day. Young me, my family was not wealthy growing up, so when I got my record deal, it was six figures as a signing bonus. So 19-year-old me got handed a massive check, all dollars, no cents over here. So I just went, I thought, oh, this is the first check of many. It was not. And so I learned pretty quickly how fast a dollar can go. And, I wish I had more memories if I would have avoided the bottle a little harder. I'm about to be 8 years sober in October. And so in these last 8 years, I've really learned a lot about myself and life in general that being a young kid in a band, traveling the world, my best friends, the drinking and the drugs is just a part of it. And then it became a massive part of it for me. And I'm glad that I escaped the grip that had me for a while. But yeah, I would tell my younger self, man, avoid the path of the booze and stuff, and just save your money and see what you can do.
8 years is a long time to be sober, so congratulations.
Thank you.
That's not easy. Is there anything that you would like to say to the fans that have been with you since the start of 12 Stones?
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to do the things I've done for so many years. Thanks for sticking with us. We always wait a long time in between releasing music, not for any other reason than we don't want to force it. We don't want to make it out. So for those people that have been with us from the beginning and even new fans, thank you for giving us the amount of time that you have to listen to us, to check us out, to give us an honest opinion. Thanks for coming to the shows. And I think a lot of people don't realize in modern times, everybody is so accessible. You can Google anything, you can YouTube anything, you can follow all the bands on social media, but there's still nothing more valuable to those of us in bands than you showing up to the live performances. Buy a t-shirt, shake our hands, come take pictures with us, come meet us, but be present. We love every single person that's graced us with their presence and given us the opportunity to take a stage or to do anything. We played a show the other night in Biloxi, Mississippi. John and I did an acoustic show. Wasn't that many people, but everybody in that room wanted to be there. They were singing along. It made it a wonderful night for us. So if you're out there and you're listening and there's the band that you support and your presence is so much more valuable than you could even imagine. Just showing up to the shows, singing along, and being part of that moment. Because each show for us is unique, is special. I try to play every show like it's our last one, and so we want to say thank you guys for sticking with us through all these years, and we hope that moving on the rest of 25 and into 2026 that we start seeing a lot more of you at these shows, and we get to hang out and make some more friends.
So, as we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for your lifelong pursuit of mastery as a singer and as a songwriter. I want to commend you for having the courage to dream big and actually pursue that dream. It takes a lot of guts to do that. And you've achieved things that very few musicians will ever achieve. So the dream and the courage to pursue it has paid off, and you've shown the rest of us musicians what is truly possible when you commit to that dream and that vision. I want to thank you for releasing such great music over the last 25 years. It's a soundtrack to the lives of millions of people around the world. I mentioned that I bought that album 23 years ago, so it's been a part of my life for a long time. And last but not least, I want to thank you for sitting down with me for the last 2 hours for this interview. I had all these questions as a 12 Stones fan. You answered all my questions, and I really appreciate your time. So thank you, Paul.
No, it's my pleasure, very much so, and I'm honored to do it, and we're happy to do it anytime, man. We're very fortunate to be where we are and to do these things. So, this is a huge honor for me to just even be considered to do an interview like this. It was very well done, and I love the questions. It's not the typical, 20-minute radio interview where they're like, a little quirky little back and forth questions. It was very well thought out, very well put together, and I'm honored to be a part of it.
Well, thank you, and you're very welcome. So, to the Paul fans, the 12 Stones fans, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Who would you like me to feature next for a 2-hour deep dive interview? You can let me know in the comments. You can also send me an email at joelmartinmastery@gmail.com, or you can reach out to me on all social media platforms at joelmartinmastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.